Welcome everybody, come on in and get a seat. And if you already have a seat, find somewhere to put it. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Fred Kahl. I'm known in Coney Island as the Great Fredini. And today's talk, this is all about the history of technology as entertainment. Today we're surrounded by technology as entertainment with our phones and all kinds of interactive entertainment. But I'm a big fan of looking to the past as a lens for envisioning the future. So if you look at this quote, this is probably the most overused quote associated with the maker movement, the Arthur C. Clarke, about any sufficiently advanced technology is equivalent to magic. And magic is what I look for when I look for experiences. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1770. And does anybody know what this is? This is the Mechanical Turk. It is arguably the world's first robot. In 1770, this machine was created, and it would play chess mechanically. Its arms would move to move the pieces, and it beat kings and queens, heads of states, dignitaries. For over 70 years, this device baffled people, and it was rare that someone could actually beat the Turk. But it was eventually revealed that it was actually a very good chess-playing midget hidden in the mechanics of it. So these are the kinds of things that I am fascinated by coming from Coney Island. So let's take a little look at some things that are in literature and popular culture that have influenced technology over the years. 1870, Jules Verne, From the Earth to the Moon, foreshadowed 100 years later, man walking on the moon. Dick Tracy with his television wristwatch. There's a lot of products in the marketplace that resemble that these days. And of course, Star Trek's tricorder. I think we all carry one nowadays, don't we? I read an article recently about the Society of the Future of Zoos. They're actually looking at creating clone zoos to create extinct animals. I expect we will see this in our lifetimes. And even if you look at things like Avatar, this is not so far off from what we see going on with drones in the US Army today. And finally, of course, there's the Star Trek replicator, which we're seeing evidence of all around us here at Maker Faire today with 3D printing. So these are the kinds of things that resonate for me, the way that popular culture envisions technology, and that technologists, rather than approaching things from what is possible, approach things from creating magical experiences. So this is me. My name is Fred Kahl. I worked in Coney Island at the Sideshow for over a decade. This is what I did for a living. I swallowed swords and hammered nails up my nose and performed feats of magic. I work with this organization, Coney Island USA. It's a nonprofit arts organization at Brooklands Amusement Park. It's dedicated to preserving uniquely American forms of art and entertainment. We put on the Mermaid Parade. It's the country's biggest art parade. We put on one of the last 10 in 1 circus sideshows left. We've been instrumental in the sideshow and burlesque revivals. We put on a film festival and scores of programming around the world. And this past year, I left my day job. I started a company, Fredini Enterprises, and the idea is that we're a 3D printing company, but we're not about making machines. I'm all about the content that drives 3D printing, because without meaningful content, there isn't a good reason for us to own the machines. Now, the name Fredini was kind of a joke. It was like a play on Houdini, everybody knows, arguably one of the most famous magicians. But Houdini wasn't his real name. This is actually Eric Weiss. But he took the name Houdini because he thought it meant like Houdin. And if you don't know about him, Robert Houdin was the first modern magician. So previous to Houdin, magicians dressed in big, long, flowing robes, and he's dressed like in contemporary evening wear. And he was inspired by inventions like the Mechanical Turk. So he was a watchmaker. This is one of his famous tricks. It was a blossoming orange tree. At his beckoning, the tree would flower and grow oranges before your very eyes. He had a lot of automatons that he built with complicated mechanisms. One of my favorite tricks by him is this levitation right here. It was known as the ethereal suspension. He would have assistants in the eaves of the theater with red-hot shovels. They would pour ether on top of the shovels and fan ether fumes over the audience. So everybody was kind of entranced, literally. And he would suspend his son. And it was actually, I'm going to divulge exclusive magical secrets here today, ladies and gentlemen. This is how the trick was accomplished. I actually found the plans for this in the 80s when I was a little younger, and we welded one of these things up, and lo and behold, it worked. It was a kind of magical moment. Well, Houdin really was the first modern magician, and he was a pretty powerful conjurer. In fact, the French government hired him to go quell a rebellion in Algiers. It seemed that the chiefs in Algiers had started a rebellion, and they had done some sort of magical feats that incited everybody to rebel. He went down. He had the chief fire a bullet at his head. He caught the bullet in his teeth. They were shocked. Then he had the youngest boy out there carry out a little trunk, and then by means of an electromagnet, the trunk was firmly fastened to the ground. The strongest man in the audience was made to feel as if they were weaker than the smallest child. And he quelled the rebellion. So that's Robert Houdin. Here's another unusual character. This is Captain Paul Boynton. Now, he actually didn't invent this inflatable rubber suit. It kind of turned him into the human kayak. He actually used this to traverse. He was a showman, really, and he used this rubber suit to traverse the English Channel. Here he is being attacked by a shark. But what's important about this guy is that he is the inventor of the modern amusement park. In his later years, he settled in Coney Island, and he created Sea Lion Park. It was the first gated amusement park. In the back, you see Shoot the Chutes. It was a water flume ride, and it had a ramp at the end so that the boat was launched in the air and splashed, and the spectators got wet. And this was a big innovation in what was to become the amusement industry here in America. Now, I first settled in Coney Island in the 1980s. So when I got there, it was kind of at a low point in its life. It's said that there's more remaining of ancient Rome than there is of turn-of-the-century Coney Island. Well, this is the landscape I arrived at. We see the Cyclone roller coaster, and in the background is the parachute jump, otherwise known as the Eiffel Tower of Brooklyn. It's actually, this was an invention used by the Army. It was used to train parachutists, and then it was created as a ride and taken to the first World's Fair. In 1939, it was actually the Lifesavers attraction at the World's Fair. Now, the World's Fair is relevant to Maker Faire because that's where Maker Faire in New York happens. And I've always been fascinated by the most iconic of all World's Fair imagery, the Trilon and the Perisphere. These architectural forms actually have a long history throughout World's Fair. So, of course, Queens, New York, that's the site of the 39 World's Fair. It's also where the 65 World's Fair is. And, Dale Doherty wrote about this attraction last year in the New York Times. Buckminster Fuller's original vision for this globe was that it would be covered with lights, and those lights could visualize data, things like population migrations, drought, etc. All kinds of data could be represented on the surface of this globe, but when it was built, there wasn't the technology to do it. Now, of course, today here at Maker Faire, we could probably send a team of hackers on this and set them loose, and in a weekend they could figure it out to do this, but that wasn't possible then. Anyway, this whole form of the sphere and the tower actually went back to 1852. This is the site of the first United States World Fair on the site of Bryant Park in Manhattan. This was America's answer to London's Crystal Palace. And there's the dome of the Crystal Palace on Bryant Park. And then, of course, there was the Latting Observatory. And this was the first major tower created as an observation tower. And inside the Crystal Palace, Otis unveiled his brand new invention. Elijah Otis raised himself 3 stories above the crowd, and then he proceeded to produce a dagger. He took the dagger to the rope, suspending the elevator, and pandemonium broke out in the crowd. They thought he was committing suicide in front of them. He severed the rope and nothing happened because he was unveiling his new invention, the safety elevator. So between the safety elevator and steel construction, this created a revolution in architecture, and it really enabled Manhattan, Chicago, and all major cities in the world to expand upward. Rem Koolhaas wrote about this. He called it vertical ascension as a means of escape. In fact, a few years later, for the first 100th anniversary of the United States, the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, they created this observatory, and I love this engraving because it compares it to all the major, the Capitol building and the pyramids of Egypt. But this tower was ultimately moved to Coney Island. And Coney Island, it was said that you could see as far as Manhattan, over 25 miles from the peak of this observatory. And of course, the most famous observational tower is the Eiffel Tower in Paris, built for the 1889 exposition. You can see the progress of it being built over time. So when it came time for the Chicago World's Fair, 1893, the World Columbian Exposition, America had to one-up this, and they didn't know what they could do. They found this guy, George Ferris, who invented the Ferris wheel. This is the Chicago World's Fair Ferris wheel under construction, and when completed, it was over 300 feet tall. Each one of these cars carried 60 people. It took 20 minutes to go around. They served drinks on the ride. Over 2,000 people rode simultaneously. Well, there was a young man from Coney Island who took his honeymoon at the World Columbian Exposition. This is George C. Tillieu, and he's really the father of the modern amusement park right here. He took his honeymoon there, and he tried to commission the Ferris wheel. He couldn't afford it, so he returned to Coney Island and he posted a sign. He could only afford half the size of the Ferris wheel in Coney Island, and so he put up a big sign saying, "On this site will be erected the world's largest Ferris wheel." And that became one of the anchor attractions in what was to become Steeplechase Park. Now, Steeplechase was really named after this ride. It's a steeplechase ride. It was a kind of mechanical horse race, a roller coaster of horses. And this, coming out of the Victorian era, what Tillieu provided in steeplechase was the opportunity for a man to publicly put his arms around a woman and not be ashamed about expressing affection. So the man was able to hold on tight to the girl and keep her from falling off the horse, and it really was a revolution in public display of affection. The entrance to the park, the Barrel of Fun, allowed people to fall and tumble all over each other and not be ashamed of it. And probably the most famous thing that Steeplechase offered was this. The exit from the park, you'd find yourself exiting onto a stage. They called it the Blowhole Theater. They actually, they have a clown who'd try and steal the man's hat and shock him with an electric cattle prod, and then they'd chase the girl so she'd run over a jet of air in the floor and her skirt would blow up over her face, and mortified, the couple would kind of run off stage, and then they'd turn around and they would laugh hysterically at the next victim. So that was the Blowhole Theater, and it was probably the most famous thing Steeplechase Park had. Now, Coney Island at this time was really where a lot of innovation in amusement parks happened. So there's a lot of inventions that came out of Coney Island. The hot dog is one of the most famous, and it purely came about because Charles Feltman didn't want to wash so many plates. He had the innovation of putting the sausage in a bun so he didn't have to wash the dishes. And then Nathan, handworker who worked the booth, he had the innovation to grill the hot dogs instead. So they actually were called Red Hots at the beginning, and people questioned, what is this made out of? And that's why they became known as hot dogs. The roller coaster is another Coney Island innovation. The L.A. Thompson Switchback Railway you see here, some of the earliest roller coasters. There are many, many Coney Island patents that were originated in Coney Island. This is a flip-flap railway. It was actually in Sea Lion Park. 1901, loop-the-loop coaster. What they didn't realize is you got a whiplash coming out of it because it was in a perfect circle. So that ride didn't last very long. They quickly changed it to an elliptical shape, and that's what still stands in roller coasters today. William Mangles was a ride manufacturer who based himself in Coney Island. Up in the upper right is one of his most famous rides from Steeplechase Park. It's called the Human Roulette Wheel. It was a polished wood disc. Everybody would sit on it, and it would start spinning faster and faster and faster and faster until everybody flew off. It was obviously the age before all the litigation we have today, but that was a really great ride. The whip that you see below is still used in amusement parks around America. But the most interesting ride that came to Coney Island, it actually began in the Pan American Expo in Buffalo in 1901, was called A Trip to the Moon. It was a brainchild of Frederick Thompson, a Beaux-Arts Academy dropout, and he brought it to Coney Island. It was in Steeplechase for a season, and then him and his partner Skip Dundee leased the site of Sea Lion Park, and they opened what was to become Luna Park, and the Trip to the Moon was sort of the anchor ride of the park. You would enter this attraction, and it simulated a voyage to the moon. You'd board the spaceship Luna, and it would take off. They had a scrolling background as this boat was kind of swinging in the air. You'd see Coney Island recede off into the distance. The voyagers would look out over the vast expanse of space, and then the boat would land on the moon, where they were greeted by Selenites in costume. They would then be given a tour of caverns made out of green cheese. They'd see all these various creatures that inhabited the moon. And then, this became a worldwide sensation. 1901, 1902, when this first came out, it spawned all kinds of souvenirs. In fact, I firmly believe that more than Jules Verne, this is what influenced Méliès's Trip to the Moon movie in 1902. Coming out of the ride, Frederick Thompson was this genius architect. He was really the world's first postmodern architect. He mixed and matched architectural styles, drawing things from, Asian and Middle Eastern influences, Renaissance, fairy tale castles, and he created this wild, vibrant skyline. Here's Frederick Thompson here, and here's the most magical thing about Luna Park. The whole park was lit up with Thomas Edison's brand new invention, the electric light. There were over 100,000 light bulbs illuminating Luna Park, and at night it was called the City of Fire. Nobody had ever witnessed electrical lighting on this scale ever before, and it really was a transformative experience. As I said, it was referred to as the City of Fire. It even sparked a whole trend that they called electric bathing, where you would get to bathe by the electrical light in the ocean. Truly one of the most unique attractions at Luna Park. You see over on the right-hand side of this photograph, infant incubators with living infants. So this is Dr. Martin Corney. He's the inventor of the infant incubator. Hospitals would not accept his invention. He didn't know what to do. He knew it would save lives. So he set up in the sideshow in Luna Park, and he saved tens of thousands of lives. In fact, he opened infant incubator attractions all along the Jersey Shore and at amusement parks around the world. And of course, today, this is standard practice for premature infants. You would actually pay admission, and you would see the tiny little babies in the infant incubators. So it's great for me. I'm really excited being here at Maker Faire. I love sharing this stuff. This is what really fires me and my inspiration. I haven't been to San Francisco in over 25 years. You have this great attraction in town, the Musée Mécanique. I was there in the 80s, and I saw this. It's a toothpick amusement park. And when I saw this, I knew about Luna Park, and I thought, I'm going to build a model of Luna Park with toothpicks. Well, let me tell you, it is a hell of a lot of work gluing toothpicks together, and I gave it about a day, but I really just couldn't deal with it. But something happened about 3 years ago, And that was the advent of the desktop 3D printers. So when MakerBot came out with the Cupcake, and this is an early model I saw by Michael Curry, the 3D printable Gothic cathedral playset, I saw that and I said, this is how I can realize the Luna Park project. So I started modeling. I worked with SketchUp for a little while, and I started building some of these architectural forms. But the thing about Luna Park was it was so ornate in its decoration. It needed more detail. So I started exploring. I used a program called ZBrush, and I started actually modeling some of the architecture just based on the photographs that I had seen and trying to recreate some of this architecture. So here's the main tower and some of the details that I've found. But Coney Island's a special place in that it's not just about the space, it's about the people. This painting by Reginald Marsh really illustrates the kind of energy of the crowd, the mixing of all races and cultures with sun and sand and alcohol, and just the energy in the air is hard to capture. And that's when I discovered Reconstruct Me, which allowed me to actually 3D scan and create 3D portraits. So I wanted to kind of capture the people that make the place special as well as recreating Coney Island. So I invented this. This is a turntable and a vertical rail rig to move a Connect on. This was published last year in Make Magazine, and it is an open source, full body 3D scanning system. In about 60 seconds or less, I can make a full body 3D portrait of someone. We did a Kickstarter a year and a half ago for the Coney Island Scanorama, the portable pop-up 3D portrait studio. And I like that it fits in this long legacy of amusement parks. Going back 150 years, you might have had your silhouette cut or a photograph taken. There's elements of the 60s Mold-A-Rama machines, and we were able to create these 3D portraits. I have a little space out there. It's a former fortune teller space. You see she speaks 7 different languages on the wall there. I set up my 3D printer, and I show off 3D printing to a crowd that may not have been exposed to it. A lot of times it's the kids who've seen it in school, and they're explaining it to their parents. Last Memorial Day, we even scanned Neil Patrick Harris with his family. And I've actually scanned thousands of people at this point and created portraits. You just see the kinds of energy that we capture, and it's really about the relationships of these people. And it's a new kind of portraiture. We call it physical photography. Now, sometimes with 3D printing, it doesn't always work out the way you intended. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I find something that looks like this. We call these the zombie army. They're all the print fails, the turd on legs, or you never know what might happen if you don't pay attention to the machines. But I finally started this last year. I have an exhibit in the Coney Island Museum. It's ongoing, and we started to put all these elements together, and you really started to get to feel. So I had a crowd of people, and then I had all these parts that were 3D printed, just to give you an idea of the amount of parts that we've made. I've done over 10,000 hours of 3D printing on this project, and it finally started to come together until it is what we see here. So this central tower here that we see is 6'8". It's over 150 3D prints, and it's a model of what Luna Park really looked like. There's a lot of urban development happening there, and my worst nightmare would be to see this place, Coney Island, that I love so much, turn into a bunch of refrigerator box architecture. So I really wanted to kind of create a statement about what Coney Island is at its essence, and capture the energy of that space, of what it could be again. And again, it's really just this sort of fantastical thing. But I love it, and I've been kind of working on this for 2 years now, and it's about 10% done. So I see it as a long project that's going to take a little while. I have a couple more projects going. This is inspired by early Coney Island attractions, Creation and the Gates of Hell, as well as Rodin's Gates of Hell. I'm exploring 3D sculpting with 3D scanned elements to create these large-scale architectural models. They're going to be artworks. They're going to be cast in glass and metal. This is Jet Guy, who helped me build this Core XY printer and some of the early sketches for that. But that's me. I'm here in the expo hall at the back with the Scanorama 3D Portrait Studio. I invite you all to come over and see what we're up to. And I want to leave you with one final thought. You know, a lot of technologists really approach things by what is possible, but when I want you to make things, I want you to be inspired and think about making something that's magical and resonance and come from it from a point of inspiration. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.